political rhetoric and seeming polarization to make some things happen together as a country. My second bias is I believe the true unit of politics is the state in India. Our obsession with national politics is simply that, obsession in my view. There is so much of debate and discussion about the power games at the national level, which are really irrelevant to the lives of most of the people most of the time. Late Jayaprakash Reddy used to say, to understand politics in India, you must actually understand the assembly constituency, not the Lok Sabha constituency. With these biases declared, let me make a few points very briefly. First, I actually believe that we have done many things right. Sometimes when we are immersed in the political battleground, we forget how much we accomplished. The fact that in an extraordinarily diverse country, we retained unity. The fact that broadly political freedoms, while there are many flaws, they are intact. The fact that regular elections are held peacefully, by and large. Whatever be the process outside the polling booth, within the polling booth, generally it's fair, the count is honest, and there is a peaceful transfer of power. By and large, we never challenge the verdict. We only have to see what's happening in the US and other countries to recognize that we have actually done some things well, not expected in 1947 or 50. Many people gave up on us. Whatever be the failings of politicians, and there are many, and we're all too ready to attack politicians, one remarkable thing politicians have been always doing is reconciling conflicting interests in a diverse society. Caste, region, religion, language. Of course, there are many flaws, and yet, if you view it from a broad global standpoint, and if you take a longer sweep of history, it's quite extraordinary. I think we should celebrate all these. In the last 30 years in particular, because we're talking of states conference, federalism actually became much stronger. Pre-1990 or so, I'm sure many of us recall Article 356, and for everything you have to go to Delhi for every. I remember bureaucrats traveling to Delhi for 1 crore, half a crore, 30, all kinds of things. Today, despite discontents on occasion, states are actually masters of their own destiny in a very substantial measure. And we have achieved some moderate growth. We could have done more, but there is some moderate growth. So in this context, what's the unfinished agenda? Nothing new or spectacular, so I'll just list them. Already in the informal discussion, we're talking about education. And our friend from AAP in Delhi talked about free education. I don't think that's the real issue in the country, let me be candid. We have by and large free education in the country. The problem is we have no education. It is not free or unfree that is the issue. Our educational outcomes at school and college level are appalling. Appalling. If you get decent education, about 80% gene pool is wasted in this country. I speak with some feeling because I grew up in a village. I went to a village school, Telugu medium. The Panchayat Samiti is a Jilla Parishad school, so I know what I'm speaking about. I have no doubt whatsoever that the greatest sin that we have committed as a country in the past 75 years is the unfulfilled potential because the bulk of the people did not get a chance, not because they didn't want education. When the poorest are spending disproportionate sums to give their children a head start. Governments are spending enormous sums. In some states, expenditure is 90,000 rupees per capita. Andhra Pradesh spends 90,000 rupees per capita per year. It's not small change. Many states, they spend 70 to 75,000 rupees per capita per year. Some states maybe 40, 50,000. It's not so much infrastructural money. We have to really focus on educational outcomes. Healthcare, unlike education, is both underfunded and the area is underserved. 6 crore people are descending into poverty every year in this country for want of access to health care, and because of out-of-pocket expenditure or because of lost productivity and incomes on account of ill health. I can assure you, as a physician and as somebody who has paid a lot of attention, as somebody who has played some role in getting the National Health Mission in place, at a relatively low expenditure, we only spend about 1.2% of the GDP on health, 70% by the states, 30% by the union. It's a ridiculously low figure. But we are lucky as a country. If we just spend another 0.5 to 0.8% GDP, under 2% GDP as a country, but properly spent, wisely spent, we can remarkably improve healthcare. We are very privileged as a country. Very few countries have that opportunity. And we are not finding the will in this country to find the resources and design the system to be able to deliver healthcare for our people. The third big area on which there cannot be any controversy, these three areas I'm mentioning are really non-controversial. They ought to be in any sensible democracy. Rule of law. Forget which party is in power. There is no real rule of law in the country. And remember, most of the rule of law is in the states. Unlike in the US and other countries, there is no federal crime in India. There is only state which is custodian of all crime investigation. India is the only country, only significant country, where the criminal cases far outnumber civil cases. What it means is, it doesn't mean that we have more crime. It means that hardly any civil case is registered in courts because nobody wants to go to a court. Criminal cases, by and large, do get registered. So we have 2-to-1 ratio of criminal versus civil. And of course, the delay, etc., is very well known. A whole range of issues: police, prosecution, procedures, forensics, and of course, courts. Answers are evident. Many people have done a lot of work. It's not that we don't know what to do, but we don't seem to want to do it. Even when there is political criticism and rule of law, oftentimes what I hear is, you are abusing power. Let me get the opportunity, I will do that. We're not talking about tangible, realistic, practical solutions to actually have rule of law. The next issue, I think, is going to be a little more contentious. In a democracy, unless you carry the bulk of the people with you, you cannot run the system. Even rich countries recognize that there is a balance required of attending to the immediate needs of the poor and looking out for the long-term future of the nation, economic growth, infrastructure, etc. It cannot be one or the other. The moment you pit welfare against growth or growth against welfare, it's a disaster politically and democratically. I'm opposed to the nomenclature of freebies. I believe these are short-term individual welfare measures which are necessary in a democracy. But can a nation endure or grow if our focus is almost entirely on individual short-term welfare measures at the cost of long-term growth? Let me give an example of my home state of Andhra Pradesh. When late NTR started 2 rupees a kg rice program, very hugely popular, he was a man of deep compassion, genuine integrity and commitment. When he institutionalized it, the total subsidy borne by union or the state was about 330 crores per year. 1 rupee 50 paise per kg. Market price was 3 rupees 50 paise. 2 rupees was what the government was giving. About 22 lakh tons were distributed. Today, 40 years later, in the two successor states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, we are distributing 64 lakh tons. Market price is between 30 and 40 rupees a kg rice, you know. It's now priced by the government at 1 rupee. The subsidy is 20,000 crores. Now, have we really combated poverty? Have we really made a dent? Are we simply perpetuating poverty and giving some short-term relief and converting that into political mileage of votes? Or are we really making poor people non-poor, letting them stand on their own feet? Remember Gandhiji's talisman. He did not say, look at the poorest man in the farthest corner and help him. He said, if what you do gives him a measure of control over his life, then that is worth doing. Are we giving a measure of control over their lives? Or are we treating the poor as cannon fodder for our political and electoral calculus? I know it's a very challenging question. I believe genuinely we have to take care of the poor. But all I'm saying is let there be a reasonable balance. Because without adequate opportunity to grow incomes, to generate employment, you cannot end poverty. Mitigating the pain of poverty in the short term is necessary but not sufficient. We have to balance both. If there's anything we discovered, we learned in the past 25, 30 years, it is that. But somehow we seem to be forgetting that in our desperate quest for short-term political gains. And there's one particular challenge. Actually, even individual short-term welfare measures are necessary. On any given day, I would support them because the bulk of the people are getting that. Per capita, it's not a big amount. A government can always change a policy and redesign these programs. And as people come out of poverty, you can withdraw them. But there's something much more dangerous that is happening. Much more dangerous that is happening. India has 53 crore workers in all sectors put together. 3% of them are in government, the employees of the union and the states. 97% are outside, of whom about 89% are unorganized, voiceless, without a regular monthly wage earning, without a security about what happens next day or next week. We have a pension system for government employees. They should get it. But our pension system was badly designed from independence. It is unfunded. We have not really put money on a monthly or yearly basis. Unfunded, index-linked, along with the rise of the Pay Revision Commission and DA, pension keeps rising, and phenomenal in numbers. In 2004, all parties came together and decided that we will actually have a pension system on par with the rest of the world. Funded pension, contributed by the government and the employee, so that there's no burden on the next generation. And that's continued for 18 years beautifully, except one state of West Bengal. Every state embraced it by consensus. Suddenly, 3% employees of the government, they are now frightening political parties into submission. And state after state is now tempted to go back to the old pension system, which is unsustainable. Why am I saying this? The expenditure in India on pension, as a proportion of the total revenues of the governments, union and states, is 15%. 15% today. If you take states, right now salaries and pension together, they constitute 74% of the total state's expenditure. Very soon, in the next 20 years, it will become 129%. 129% of the revenues. There is simply no way it is sustainable. If you take US, Britain, France, Germany, which have a fantastic welfare system, everybody in the country is covered by a social security system. It is funded by, in the US, what's called a payroll tax. The employer and the employee, they both contribute. And the money comes out of that to pay the pensions or social security. You don't draw it from the tax money. And everybody gets it in the country. For whatever reasons, because of the colonial legacy, we have a system where the government employees are put on a pedestal. I was a government employee. I always treated them with great respect and dignity. I'm not opposed to their getting their due, but they're getting their due. The people of India must get their due. That's the critical thing. In the US, for instance, the pension drawn on an average Social Security, everybody from Bill Gates, an ordinary person, contributes money. The pension drawn on an average is about 25% of the per capita income. In India, only 3% draw it. 97% contribute through taxes. The pension is 277% of the GDP per capita. If you take some states, they have done studies, the pension burden as a ratio of the total revenues of the state, today 11% some states, it will rise by 2047 to 28.6%. If you take debt GDP ratio, you take the state of Andhra Pradesh, now it is 38%. By 2047, it will be 107% of the GSDP, state alone. The FRBM norm is the state 20%, union 40%. Somehow, because this crisis is going to happen 10 years later, and 10 years is no a lifetime. As Henry Ford said, in the long term, you're all dead. We're assuming it's not an issue. It's a fundamental issue. This is going to be the difference between success and failure of this country. Eradication of poverty and perpetuation of poverty. I'm concluding. My appeal is, I know this is contentious, but my appeal is, unless the states figure out a way of reconciling this in the interest of the 97% people of India, we will not have any future in 2047. I wish there's actually going to be a future independent of economics. We will not have it. Maybe we could discuss some other critical issues, electoral reforms. Brindaji is very committed to that. Many of us are committed. Local governments, decentralization of power. But as I said, my bias is in favor of the states, and my inclination is to believe that India will do better and better. I'm an optimist. We've done a great deal. We can and we must do a lot more. I hope we'll have a meaningful, honest discussion, because this is not covered by TV cameras or media. We must have a genuine discussion based on evidence and logic. And let's hope that there'll be some deepening of understanding and some broad consensus, and we can pursue whatever we can in our respective states. Thank you.